Hello, this is Hooked by Happenstance. I'm Kendra, and today we're going to do something a little different. I was tagged by Amber at Ooh Aah Crochet a ridiculous amount of time ago, I think. I don't know, I just haven't gotten around to making this video yet, to do the 10 non-yarny things video, which I was considering not doing at all because it feels real bandwagony to me, and I mean, if you know anything about me, yarny or not, I'm not really a big fan of like doing what everyone's doing, but I thought I would do this because I've been thinking on it since she proposed that challenge to me, and I was trying to decide what things we would talk about, and I decided that I'd kind of theme it because a number of items that I kept thinking of all turn out to be about books. So we're going to talk about books and books throughout my lifetime. I've grabbed a small heap of books that will lead to some talking points. And then I might cut these all together so they're chronological. So, the first bookish fact about me is that before I could even read, my mother and I frequented our local library so much. I grew up in a town that had a really nice library, and about the time I moved when I was in 3rd grade, they started doing renovations, and now it's like super swanky and like really nice. But it still has this giant mural. I think it still has it. Last time I went in the building, it still had the mural, but everything else around the mural had changed. There was this giant mural in the kids section, and then just rows and rows of books on this like upper floor. There was like a water feature, and then a bunch of chairs, and then like the circulation desk. And there were 2 ways in, like a top row and a bottom row, like ramped to get around all the books and all the places. So you'd walk down the upper ramp through the little thingies that would beep if you tried to carry out the books, and into the kids section. The way my mom and I went through reading books is we literally just started at the beginning of a shelf, and we took, I think our max was like 25 books or something. We would just get 25 books off the edge of that shelf. And then we worked our way around the entire children's section doing that more than once. And then we'd also like pick and choose, and I had some favorite books that we'd get to. But we literally read the entire section more than once. So that's the first fun fact. Second fun fact that involves that library and every library I've been to since: libraries make me have to pee. So after you walked down that like the top ramp and before you got to the children's section, there was a bathroom next to this mural, and the bathroom there was special because as opposed to the big bathrooms that were kind of in the atrium area, which I would use a lot when I would go to do like programs. I did a lot of programs at the library. I would use those bathrooms, but when you were in the kids section, you could go use the kids bathroom. The kids bathroom had a child-sized toilet. And so I would always make sure to use it when I was there because that was fun. But I think it got in my brain that I associate libraries with needing to pee because everywhere we've ever lived, and Steve and I go to the library now, I can't help it. I even we'll go to Walmart now before we go to the library, and I will go to the bathroom there. So that way I don't have to go when I get to the library, and before we leave, it is inevitable, I will have the urge because, I don't know, libraries just make me have to pee. Other things that I remember reading, we had subscriptions. My mom was signed up for lots of these book clubs for me because she loved books, and I'm very thankful because she also held on to a bunch of them, and they are now part of my library. We have a very large setup of shelves full of children's books. I actually don't have very many adult books in my house, but I know that will change as these kind of shuffle out, or more importantly, they will shuffle into boxes at some point to be passed on to my own children. But these are a couple of my favorite of these sets. This I received in April of 1989, or no, 87. And this is called Rabbit's New Rug by Judy Delton. The pictures are by Mark Brown. He's the same person that did the art for Arthur the Aardvark, you know, PBS Kids and all that. And these are from Parents Magazine, had a book set, but I love this book. It is all about Rabbit getting a new rug, and his rug is beautiful. It looks like the end pages of this book, which is beautiful. And he wants all his friends to come and see his rug, but he makes them all walk around the outside of the room because he wants to keep his rug clean, and then chaos ensues, as one can imagine. But I love it, and actually as I'm opening this up, really, really love these end pages. So, Rabbit's New Rug. I highly recommend. I don't think this is a book that's easy to find, but it's really good. Another book, which is from the Weekly Readers Book Club. This one was actually not mine as a kid, but I do remember reading this when I was little. And then we read it a bunch with my kids when they were really little. It's called A Porcupine Named Fluffy by Helen Lester. And it is about a porcupine, and her name is Fluffy. And that's just so ironic, and I love it. And she ultimately ends up meeting a rhinoceros named Hippo. And then, you know, bestest of friends they become because, of course, they both have names that do not match what you would expect of them. And I enjoy that. I loved these book clubs. I feel like I had something... Oh, here. These are the other book club thing. So these are sets from the Weekly Reader Book Club also. And I have two sets. They're a little bit mixed up right now. But a bunch of these are Fraggle books from Fraggle Rock. So this is Gobo and the Prize from Outer Space. That's super good. The Case of the Missing Socks. Sprocket Dog Detective. And then you gotta love What Do Doozers Do? I love Doozers. Doozers are great. So those are the Fraggle books, and there's like a ton more. There's one in here about one of the Fraggles makes a scarf for her friend, and her friend doesn't like the scarf, and like, what do you do when you don't like something someone's made for you? And it's very funny. Danger Boober Cooking is also hilarious, even to this day. And then I also had have some other books that are up, I think mostly in the kids' room, but I had a set of Muppet Baby books. I loved the Muppet Babies when I was little. I actually found out recently, I talked about the Muppet Babies when I did Jolly Joy and Other Junk. I talked about them, and I was talking about how I really kind of want to make myself a pair of nanny socks. They're caretaker, and I wanted to make some socks that looked like hers. So I went, after I talked about them for a very long time in my video, I went and looked up what her socks looked like just to make sure that I remembered correctly. If you're curious, this is what her feet look like. That is mostly all you ever saw of Nanny in the TV show. But then I found out that apparently there is a new Muppet Baby show out, which I was unaware of because I basically only watch YouTube. And then whatever Steve tells me is on Netflix because he watches that some at work. But yeah, apparently there's a new Muppet Babies, and the new Muppet Babies, Nanny's socks are a little more like Miss Frizzle-esque in that they change the picture on them to match like the theme of the episode or what's going on. But I don't know. I still feel like I need some Nanny socks. They will happen. I just have to find the right green yarn. It's got to be the right color. Alrighty, so then I learned to read, right? So I was in kindergarten and we're doing all the reading things. I mean, I already kind of knew how to read, but like the first easy readers we were doing in school involved pigs. And I really, really, really remember my beginning phonics readers, and they had two pigs, and their names were Sam and Nan. And I loved these books, and Nan had a pan, you know, because the phonics thing. And I really wanted to, when teaching my kids to read, I really wanted to use these phonics readers. I looked all over and could not find them because, like, I didn't know any more information about them than what stories I remembered from them, and we tried to figure it out, and we couldn't. So, anyways, kids have all learned to read other ways. But Sam and Nan, and those pigs, hold a special place in my heart. I also had a friend in elementary school whose, like, familial nickname for her was Nan, and it was so funny because in my head, whenever they would call her Nan, I would picture that cute little pig, and believe me, she looks nothing like Nan the pig, but that's what I picture in my head. So then, I now know how to read, right, and so I am just gobbling up all the books, and let's see, the first books that I remember reading is this set of Dell Young Yearling books. The New Kids at the Polk Street School by Patricia Riley Giff. Watch Out Man-Eating Snake is the first one. Then we have Fancy Feet. And we have All About Stacy, who I called Stancy because the first time I sounded it out, I accidentally put an N in there. And And then I could not remember that her name was Stacy. I would read this to my mom. She's like, who's Stancy? And she's like, you know that name is Stacy, right? So then I changed it, but every time I see it, and every time I see a human named Stacy, my first instinct is that their name is Stancy. Some habits are really hard to break because it's been like 30 years. Then there's a couple other books in this series, but they're currently in my kids' room because they are currently reading this. So I'm glad we held on to these. I had 5 books. Book number 4 did not make it through the first kid. We're hoping that the rest of the set makes it through the rest of the kids, but you never know. And I mean, these were real expensive. They were $2.75 a piece when they first came out. What is the publication date on these? I'm curious now. These are copyright 1988. I was born in 84. So those are the first like chaptery books that I remember reading. Another thing that I really enjoy is poetry. And my favorite poet I discovered when I was in the 4th grade. And I actually it happened that I discovered my favorite poem, which is Patterns by Amy Lowell. This is a little selected anthology. Amy Lowell poetry books are real expensive because, or at least they were back when I last looked to buy them. Like even this book, this was a $20 book. And I bought this when I was in high school. But the way that I discovered Amy Lowell's poetry was through a book when I was in the 4th grade. You go and do like library time. And so there was a little blue book, and I have been looking for a copy of this book now for 25 years and have not found it. Because anyways, I'm fairly certain it was a Reader's Digest anthology. It's little, the size of those small pocket Bibles that used to be super popular. And this book had that same the onion skin paper. There were so many poems in this little book, and it had a dark blue cover and gold writing and a gold ribbon that you could mark you could mark your spot in the book. And one of the first poems in the book was Patterns by Amy Lowell. And I loved it. I checked that book out when it was my turn at the library so many times. And if I didn't check it out, my best friend checked it out a bunch. I don't know. I am no longer in contact with that person. I don't know if she remembers reading those poems, but I definitely do. They have stuck with me. And Amy Lowell has just been an interesting signpost through time. When I was in 6th or 7th grade, I did this thing through Sac State University because I lived in a suburb of Sacramento, and it was called Academic Talent Search, and it enabled middle school kids to take courses on a college campus. They weren't college courses. They were courses taught by professors though, but they were meant for a younger audience. I took one on public speaking, I took a speed reading class, I took a statistics kind of class, I took a chemistry class where I made a tie-dye shirt out of all natural chemical dyes, which is really cool. Which you'd think I should probably do some fun natural dyeing, which at some point I will. But that was fun. And then I took a poetry class. And one of our assignments in the poetry class, in addition to reading and experiencing and writing a lot of our own poetry, was to do a research paper. And the coolest thing was that I had access, because of this course, to the Sac State Library and the ability to take out books, which was super cool, and access to their computer system and all those things. And this was still back in the days when microfiche was a thing. We researched a bunch of microfiche for stuff. It was fun, and it was fun to have access to this library when I was younger. It definitely made me take better use, I think, of our library when I was in college, because I was already exposed to it before I was even in high school. And I did some high school research papers through that library too, but you had to get extra permission to do that. But this course meant that I was able to do some extra research, and I was able to read more of Amy Lowell's poetry books because they had them in the collection, because they were old and they're hard to come by. At least they were. Now a lot of her work you can find it online, so that's helpful. But there's something about like reading a poetry book and like holding the paper in your hands. It's a totally different experience than reading it on a screen. So I started reading her biography to write this paper, and the book was like really dense. She's part of the Lowell family. She has like a long family history, and the interesting thing about it is, so I read the beginning of the book that talked all about how she had been like engaged to this man and all these things, and I didn't finish the book because I ran out of time and access to that library. So I never got even past like the halfway point to the part where like her writing career took off and all the things, to find out that she was gay, and she was like very like well known for like smoking cigars and being kind of like out and proud, and like all this really, really interesting stuff, which I found out about her when I was older and just like randomly looking at a website, I think, to look at poems, and they had a biography there that was more nuanced, and by then more you know, time had changed, and so the things that you're willing to point out on a conservative poetry website about people had changed. And so I found out a whole bunch of like interesting facts about her, and she is just amazing. And anyways, Amy Lowell, favorite poet. I get a little bit older, and I think I was probably like 13. This is still one of my absolutely favorite books ever. And it is called Spilling Open, The Art of Becoming Yourself by Sabrina Ward Harrison. And I haven't looked to see if this person has any more books out, but this is the author / artist. And this book was $22.95 when my dad bought it for me from Borders. And the inside is just, it's kind of like a memoir-y, like, journal thing. And there's just these, like, beautiful, like, drawings and pictures and, like, scrapbooks. And her thoughts are just so poetic and amazing. And the colors, I love the colors. I've lent this book to a couple of people who were, like, artsy as, like, inspiration. I don't know if any of them ever cared, but I love, like, the back of this. I love the stuff that's written on the, like the accounting paper, columnar pads, and just the cool handwriting. And every time I look at this book, like I'm no longer paying attention to you because I'm looking through this because I really, really like it. And my dad bought this for me. My dad worked out of town most of my, like, growing up, and he worked in Chicago for a long time, and he'd come home for like a weekend every 2 weeks. And while he was there, he picked this up one time when he was in a bookstore. He thought I'd like it, and I really, really, really do. So I should look up and see whatever happened to this author, because like now she'd be like, I don't know, probably 40 or 50. I think she's closer in age to me. But this book was published in, I have no clue. Even, like, the copyright pages are all artsy and odd. That's very strange. I don't, oh, no? Oh, 2000. This is published in 2000. Wow. So he got this for me when I must have been in 8th grade. 3, 2, 1. Yes, he must have got this for me at the end of 8th grade, because I didn't think I was in high school yet when I got that, but it has been traveling around, and it is one of the books that has stayed in my personal collection for a long time. So, before I went to college, this is a non-poem related thing. Before I went to college, I graduated from high school, and when I graduated from high school, I bought my mom a graduation present, because that's normal. I decided that I was her last kid. There'd been a big age gap, and that me graduating from high school was an achievement for her as well, because, you know, she'd been parenting and having kids at home and going to school for a very long time. So I bought her a necklace that had a hand with a heart on it, and I bought her a copy of The Kissing Hand by Audrey Penn, which was one of her favorite books. She's a preschool teacher, so they had it in her classroom always, but I bought her a personal copy. Her copy is at my dad's house. But this is my copy, which she got me for my 20th birthday. She got me a copy of The Kissing Hand and also its sequel, A Pocket Full of Kisses. Now, if you have never read these books, I highly, highly recommend them. They are beautiful. It is the story of a little raccoon and his mom. And it is nighttime, and the little raccoon is old enough to be going off to school. And he's scared, and he's sad, and he doesn't want to leave his mom. So, this is the picture of the mom giving him the kissing hand. So, what the mom does is she takes his palm and she kisses it. She says, "I'll show you." Mrs. Raccoon took Chester's left hand and spread open his tiny fingers into a fan. Leaning forward, she kissed Chester right in the middle of his palm. Chester felt his mother's kiss rush from his hand, up his arm, and into his heart. Even his silky black mask tingled with a special warmth. Mrs. Raccoon smiled. "Now," she told Chester, "whenever you feel lonely and need a little loving from home, just press your hand to your cheek and think, 'Mommy loves you, Mommy loves you.' And that very kiss will jump to your face and fill you with toasty, warm thoughts." So, he's going to go off to school the next night. And before he goes, he remembers his kissing hand. And he leaves his mom with one of her own. So, it's super sweet and, it's one of those, kind of tear-jerking, but it's also just so sweet. It's, just wonderful. And then, in the sequel, A Pocket Full of Kisses, Chester now has a sibling who is scared of some things, and Chester shares the kissing hand with them. And so, it talks about that. And the art in this one is in a slightly different style, but it is still beautiful. The art is by somebody different, but the words are by the same person. So, I love these books. These are some of my super special Kendra collection, though the kids, read them and play with them and experience them, but those are some of my special books. Another one of my favorite poets I actually originally found when I was in 7th grade. I had to think of which classroom I was sitting in. 7th grade, reading through our, required curriculum for English. And there was this picture of a puppy and a little girl. And this poem called "The World Is Not a Pleasant Place to Be" by Nikki Giovanni. And note that picture of the girl with the puppy is, not really the appropriate picture I would put next to that poem, because it's just not deep or intense enough. This is my copy of the Selected Poems of Nikki Giovanni. As you can see, it has tons of things marked. She is probably my second favorite poet. She's right up there with Amy Lowell, which actually, speaking of which, here is a printed out copy that I typed at some point of Patterns by Amy Lowell stuck into my copy of the Selected Poems of Nikki Giovanni. And yeah, her work is amazing. And one of the coolest experiences I had in college was I got to go to a presentation and hear Nikki Giovanni speak and hear her read her poems, and it was breathtaking. Steve and I talked about it. Steve went with me, and it was in one of the small theaters, and it was just such a cool experience to hear the stuff in her own words. And I mean, again, a lot of these things that seem so neat are neater because of the time in which they took place in history. Now, you have more writers and poets and things who are recorded reading their work at different things, and they're published on the internet, and so you have access to hear the words the way the author intended. But that in the early 2000s was still not as easily accessible all the time. But I think it definitely is a really nice thing to have better access to now. I think it helps you to actually experience the words more on the plane that the poet intended, and then translate that to yourself as opposed to just reading it from your own perspective. But anyways, seeing Nikki Giovanni speak was amazing and definitely a highlight of college for me. Other books that I discovered poetry-wise after college, these anthologies are really good as far as love poems go. I have been on a long, ongoing quest. I have several notebooks that I transcribe poems into by hand that I like, kind of my own special blend anthology of things that pertain to or speak to me specifically. And these two books of love poems, there's a black covered one too, which I think is somewhere with one of those notebooks that I've been using it for copy work. But there's this one called Kiss Off, this one called You Drive Me Crazy. The black covered one, which I really like, that I bought same with this, is called The Hell with Love. And these are edited by Mary D. Eiselman and Elizabeth Ash Velez. And this one's Poems to Set You Free. These are love poems for real life. And I forget what the thing about The Hell with Love is. But I really enjoy the way that these are organized by, like, thoughts, like the different kind of sections that they used, I think are good. I also just have really enjoyed the variety of poems that they've chosen, and it helped me to find a bunch of poets that I had never necessarily heard of, which I do like. A lot of anthologies, I feel like, tend to just regurgitate the same poets over and over, and well, those poems are great and lovely. There is so much good poetry in the world that it's good to experience a lot of it, and it's good to experience it broadly, and anthologies are a great way to do that and find these people. And again, like I said, now it's so much easier to access poets online. If you read an anthology and find some of these things, you can then find the works that you're interested in by kind of doing a little taste test without having to necessarily have physical access, because I guarantee you a lot of the poets that I enjoy are not carried in my local libraries, because they're just not. As far as books that I read in college, this is another one of my favorite books I have ever read. And this is interesting. So it has a bookmark in here from, this is a book for a class that I took. I don't even remember the name of the course, but I remember the professor, and they were amazing. This was such a good class. The books that they picked and the articles we read were so thought-provoking and just, like, well-placed. But this book is called To Be Real by Rebecca Walker. It is an anthology of essays from different people. It says, Telling the Truth and Changing the Face of Feminism. And I just, not only did I love just about every essay I read in here, spoke to me on some level, and I just really enjoyed the writers' voices. This is one of the most pleasant books I have ever experienced. It is a soft cover book, but the binding is, like, really tight. However, the pages are really, like, loose and flexible. So you could, like, read it and bend it back, but I didn't crack the spine, because this book has been read a lot, but it doesn't necessarily show that. And the pages are just really soft, and there's highlighting all over it, to the point where the highlighting is starting to dissolve almost, because I've had it so long. It still has a thing from that class in it. This says, why is lesbian, quote, ism commodified, which must have been a topic that our group was covering in this book. I don't know. It's not my handwriting. It's somebody else's. But it's still in there as my page marker to this day. So I would be interested in rereading this book to see how much the terminology and discourse on some of these topics has changed. This book was copyrighted in 1995. I would have been reading it in 2005. So it was already 10 years old when I was reading it. So obviously, yeah, things are going to be dated. But I know that one of my favorite essays in here was it's called like Brideland, I think. But it was particularly relevant to me at the time because I was recently engaged and planning a wedding with some very conservative in-laws. So that was fun. But anyways, I will have to add these to my TBR. I think I need to read them. I think that'd be good for me. So on to more recent reading of mine. This is one of the only books in the last decade that I have read twice. I have read it in physical copy and I have listened to the audiobook. This is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I really enjoyed part of the book. This book is very special to me though, the physical copy, because of how I came about getting it. So this copy is a signed copy. If you know anything about John Green and the Vlogbrothers and all the things, John Green really likes signing his first edition books and just signing books in general. It's like kind of the thing. But this book I actually won by doing an online scavenger hunt through a Nerd Fighter Vlogbrothers thing. And so that was just a really fun day of my life that was completely consumed by this scavenger hunt online, and the first 500 people that completed it ended up with those books. And so that book is really special. Now, I know that a lot of people just, because they like him as a person, then just like his books automatically. There's a lot of things about Turtles All the Way Down that do not appeal to me. It is a teenage, romancy detective-y book. Some of those things, not so big a fan of. But the main character, Asa, has OCD. And she has these thought spirals, which is part of what is depicted by the cover with the spiraling, the turtles all the way down. And that, and the depictions and explanations and descriptions of her going through these, thought spirals, basically, yes, are super intense, well written, and written in a way that only somebody has ever experienced any of these events could write it. And that is because they are written from that place, from the author. So that in and of itself is just real good. So I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed the paper version. I enjoyed the audiobook. I think I enjoyed reading this in the paper version more than the audiobook, just because the voices didn't exactly, match what was in my head for the characters. So I've been doing a lot more reading via audiobook. I have a number of books that I'm currently in process on. Currently, I had a bunch of books I had on hold that all came up at once. So I will just tell you what's next on my to be read pile. How's that sound? So I'm currently listening to the audiobook for a book called Emergency Contact, and I am enjoying it so far. I am also going to be reading a book called Convenience Store Woman. Both of these books I heard a person who I watch on YouTube did a BookTube video about what they've been reading in January, and those two books were on there and they sounded really interesting to me. I also plan to read A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan, which is the beginning of a series of books that are fantasy about dragons. So those will keep me busy on the audiobook front. And then as far as ebooks, they're going to say physical books, but they're not physical because they're on my phone. But I am in the middle of reading Let It Snow, which is a book written by John Green, Lauren Miracle, and Maureen Johnson. And I am 55% of the way through, because when you read things on Overdrive, it tells you that percentage, which I don't know if I like that or not, but it tells me, so I know. And then I also had my Hold for an Absolutely Remarkable Thing come up, which is by Hank Green, so I will be reading that shortly. So my life is becoming more and more consumed with books, and as I'm having this conversation with you, I should really be reading more poetry. I read a lot of children's poetry. There's a lot of Jack Perletsky in my life, because we do a lot of things that are poetry related for schooling with our kids. But I should read more poems just for me, because I like it. It makes my heart happy. So maybe I'll sink some more time and energy into that. So I think that, like, if I'm looking at my to-be-reads, I was telling you all those audiobooks, I need to do that, but then I feel like I need to go back to, like, a little bit of old school. Do some Amy Lowell, because that's, like, since childhood, and I love that. Do some Nikki Giovanni poetry, because that is, like, middle school into college, and I love that. And then these essays. That's a little glimpse at my reading life. It's non-yarny. Well, at least it's non-yarny at this point. If you're interested, there will probably be some Yarn Tales videos and some of these things. I haven't really figured out how to do Yarn Tales about poetry books, but maybe I will. You never know. You'll have to wait and see, and I can assume that if these are the ones that I read, that they will be getting 5 stars. But then again, it's been a long time. I'm at a different place in my life. Maybe my perspective will have changed. Probably not too much, but maybe. We'll see. Hope that you all enjoyed these non-yarny things and listening to me ramble about books for a very long time. And I'm not going to tag anybody, because I think everyone that wants to do this has done this by now. And if you haven't and you want to, you should just do it. Okay, I will see you all next time. Bye!